Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated. It truly, truly is. Before we start, let me give you my usual disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next, if you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I would really, really appreciate it. Lastly, this video is going to cover the topic of DV very, very heavily. So, therefore, if you think that this is something that is too much for you to handle, please click off, please take care of yourself, and please come back for a different video. And with that, let's start, okay? Taylor Armstrong, who is most known for starring on seasons 1, 2, and 3 of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, alongside Kyle Richards, Kim Richards, Camille Grammer, Lisa Vanderpump, Adrienne Maloof, Brandi Glanville, and Yolanda Foster. She appeared to have it all, right? Brains, beauty, and a ton of cash. But as we all know, looks can be deceiving, and Taylor has had a hard life. Taylor Armstrong was born Shayna Lynette Hughes on June 10th, 1971 in Independence, Kansas. Her earliest childhood memory is sleeping in bed with her mom when she was just 2 years old. Her father rushes into the bedroom and he begins punching her mother in the face. 2-year-old Taylor would pull her father's hair in an attempt to get him off of her mom while her mother is curled up in a ball trying to protect herself. Her mother would never call the police and tell Taylor later in life that her father was just a very jealous person, and when he would become violent, it was usually because he had made up some scenario in his head that she was seeing another man. Remember this, because this is going to come so full circle. Her mother would get out of this relationship by the time Taylor was 3 years old. They would end up renting a tiny apartment, and her mom would have to work multiple jobs to try and keep them afloat, while living on mac and cheese and fish sticks. They would constantly move around, and Taylor would be forced to change schools multiple times. To make up for the things she was unable to give to Taylor, she would do things such as throwing the most lavish birthday parties that she could afford. Oddly enough, this would also come full circle on season 1 of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, when Taylor throws her daughter a $50,000 Alice in Wonderland birthday party. Taylor would need constant validation from men, and watching The Housewives is easy to see that this character trait followed her into adulthood. When she was in the 6th grade, her boyfriend moved away, and she says she felt like throwing herself in front of a bus. When she was in junior high, her mother would move her to Tennessee to take a job in the music industry, then move her back to Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 8th grade. That's when she would meet her next boyfriend, Jake. And to say that he was a less than perfect boyfriend would be an understatement. He treated Taylor terribly. He ignored her, he made fun of her, but Taylor stayed with him in hopes that he would change, and he would change his mind, and he would fall in love with her, desperately doing whatever she could to try and please him. When he would break up with her, she would chase him, begging and crying for him not to leave her. Her insecurities would not end there, though. While on a group ski trip, her best friend's boyfriend makes a pass at her, and Taylor, always seeking validation from men, would end up fooling around with her best friend's boyfriend. Her friend was not on the trip at the time, but she did find out about the betrayal, and she immediately and permanently ended the friendship with Taylor. Can't blame her. Taylor became a cheerleader in high school and in college. Her squad was so good that they would compete in the nationals. She earned a bachelor's degree in biology and then went on to go into the master's program at the University of Oklahoma Health and Sciences Center. While earning her degree there, she was still cheering and she had also begun coaching cheerleading. This would open up a whole new world of issues for Taylor that revolved around food from the ages of 16 to 23. She would wet cereal with milk and then squeeze out all the milk and just eat the cereal. She also mastered making a package of peanut butter crackers, like the crackers with the peanut butter in the middle of them, be her only food intake for the entire day. And then eventually she would just stop eating altogether. On weigh-in days, she wouldn't drink much at all because she believed that liquid intake will increase weight. She would also work out excessively, sometimes twice a day for as long as she could, and she would actually end up suffering several injuries as a result of this. Taylor's mother would end up finding love and marrying a man named Randall Taylor. She took to him so well that she began calling him Dad almost immediately in an effort to get rid of any connection that she had to her biological father. She even went so far as to find a lawyer in Oklahoma who would file the paperwork to legally change her name to Shayna Taylor. Her friends would begin calling her Taylor, and she loved it, saying it was the perfect way to feel like she had finally put some distance between her and her childhood. So that is how the name Taylor came about. In 2004, Taylor moved into a condo in Beverly Hills and began running a textile company. She would actually meet her future husband, Russel Armstrong, a few times before he even gave her the time of day and took her out on a date. Their first meeting was actually at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. Taylor was there meeting a friend for dinner, and Russell was there with a group of men with whom he was launching a new technology company with. After trying to get Russell to notice her at least 3 times, he finally took her out on a date. And their first date was on Valentine's Day. Russell picked up Taylor at her home, and he brought her a beautiful Frank Mueller watch, which the cheapest watch that I found was $5,000. So these watches range from $5,000 all the way to $311,000 for a used watch. Yes, a used watch. Must be nice, right? Must be nice. He took her to dinner at a restaurant called Dolce. On the way to dinner, Taylor tells Russell that she has been there before and that she'd actually been there on a date with a man that goes there all the time. She had no reason to share this information, first of all, in my opinion. She had no reason to share this information with him, especially considering that this was their first date. But again, she's such a people pleaser. She's so insecure. Her insecurities run so deep that she probably felt like she was required to share this information. Russell didn't actually have much of a response to this statement in the car, so she just figured, whatever, it wasn't a big deal. But she would be wrong. She would be so wrong. They get to the restaurant, they sit down, and the waiter comes to take their order. Everything seems fine up to this point, okay? He delivers their food and he walks away. It's at that point that Russell looks up at her and says, quote, "Well, I didn't know you were effing the bartender here." End quote. She says, "I'm sorry, what?" And he continues to go in on her, and she just finds a way to excuse it because she was convinced that Russell was perfect for her. It's, in my opinion, once again, that childhood trauma and insecurities are playing into this immensely. More importantly, he was not perfect for her. A person like this is not perfect for anybody. So please keep your standards high, people, please. Eventually, Russell decided to drop it, and they end the evening very nicely. The next morning, Taylor wakes up to a whirlwind of text messages from Russell, reading things such as, "I'm sitting here in a boardroom full of attorneys, and all I can think about is you." A week or two after Taylor and Russell began dating, he told her that he was going to have his children with him that weekend, and that he wanted her to meet them. Russell had 2 boys from 2 different women. In December of 1997, Russell is arrested in West Hollywood and charged with misdemeanor spousal battery over an altercation with his then-wife, Barbara. He paid $15,000 bail, and while he was awaiting trial, he was ordered to attend therapy once a week, attend at least 2 AA meetings per week, and abstain from alcohol and use. In March of 1998, Russell is arrested again following a fight with Barbara after she shows up at his house to confront him. He pleads no contest to the charges and is sentenced to 3 days in LA County Jail. Placed on 3 years probation, ordered to perform 50 hours of community service, spend a minimum of 1 year in anger management therapy, attend 50 AA meetings, and donate $1,000 to a women's clinic in Venice, California. Nice. Okay, so that weekend that Russell had his kids, Taylor decided to spend the Friday night hanging out with her best friend Jennifer in an attempt to be a better friend. Her plans were to spend Friday night with Jennifer and the remainder of the weekend with Russell and his children. Friday night, she goes out with her friend. The two meet up with another friend of Jennifer's at the Chateau Marmont, and he happened to be there with 2 other people, including an athlete from out of town that was visiting. Remember this, because this plays such a huge role. This poor athlete. Taylor has a great night, lots of fun, and she goes home content that she had done her girlfriend duties and anticipating spending the rest of the weekend with Russell and his children. Saturday comes, she calls, she texts, she gets no answer. Russell finally writes back to her a few days later and accuses her of sleeping with the athlete that she was hanging out with on Friday night. This is still not the end of this, though. Claiming that his friend called him up and told him this. They had agreed to go to a charity event together, so they put their issues aside and they showed up for the event. While there, Russell again accuses her of sleeping with the athlete, and then he ends up leaving her at the party by herself. She gets a ride to his house in Manhattan Beach, and after more arguing, she decides to just go take a bath and calm down. While she's in the tub, giving them space, which is clearly needed and the best thing to do at that point, right? Russell walks into the bathroom and he says to her, "You're so skinny, it's disgusting. You look like a skeleton. It's not sexy." Taylor, you're so much better than this, honey. You are so much better than this. Not long after this, Taylor is getting a facial. Her cell phone begins ringing, but obviously she can't answer it because she's getting a facial. So when she's done, she sees that it was Russell, and panic-stricken, which should be your first red flag, she calls him back. He asks her where she is, and she tells him that she's in Beverly Hills getting a facial. He calls her an effing liar. She swears she's not lying, tells him to calm down. He accuses her again of being with another man and tells her to get the F out of his life. After pleading her case, he tells her that if she ever lies to him again, that it is over forever. Taylor says in her book, which I'm going to link below, Taylor says in her book that after this, she made it a priority to change her behavior so nothing like this would ever happen again. From the beginning of their relationship, Russell made it clear that he was in charge of the relationship. With phrases like, "If you ever think this relationship is equality, you're wrong. This is not a 50-50 deal. What this actually is, friends, is a huge red flag. Get out of these relationships." He would also monitor her phone by taking it into his garage, scouring her call log, and reading her text messages. He would get mad if one of Taylor's girlfriends was at the table with them and she talked to her too much and she didn't show him enough attention. If they were out with business associates and she talked to them too long, he would get mad and assume that she wanted to sleep with them. If she gave him too much attention, then she was too needy. If she didn't give him enough attention, she was being disrespectful. He would leave her at parties and dinners alone to find her way home all the time, having to call cabs or ask people that she barely knows for rides. He sued his ex-wife for palimony, and he would scream at business associates and write them vicious emails. A neighbor of Russel's would tell Taylor one day that he had invited Russel over to his house for a party. Russel left the party because he had felt disrespected. He showed back up to this neighbor's house after the party had ended and told him that he was going to kick his ass. And before proceeding, he asked him, "Do you want me to kick your ass inside or outside?" The confrontation did escalate, though. It started inside the home and it ended in the neighbor's backyard. Russel took his neighbor's head and he held it under the water in his pool until he stopped fighting back. It was only then that Russel felt that he had proved his point. He let him go and he walked away. The neighbor's fine, by the way. Russel grew up in government-sponsored housing in the southwest area of Dallas called Oak Cliff. He apparently had a pretty rough upbringing. He had been in countless street fights. His parents had a very volatile relationship, which they did not hide. And Russel was very much aware of this. When he was 8 years old, he watched his best friend. This is according to what he tells her and what she puts out there. Okay? But according to him, when he was 8 years old, he watched his best friend get shot and killed by a security guard. Okay? So apparently they walk into a convenience store and his friend has a stick in his hand and the security guard thinks that it's a weapon. And that's just tragic if it's true. I tend to wonder how much you could believe the stories that were told by him, though. That's why I say that. After Taylor was told these stories, whether true or not, she began to feel closer to Russel, almost like she wasn't the only person in the world living an effed up childhood. Like somebody understood her. The saddest part about this is that it gave her a false sense of security. One night in Miami, while at a club, Russel has a little too much to drink. So his drink of choice is Crown Royal and Coke. When they get back to the hotel, he has concocted this story in his head, again, that Taylor was sleeping with a bunch of guys at the Beverly Hills Hotel and the Four Seasons Hotel in LA. This becomes very concerning to her because, one, she has never slept with anybody else. Two, she has never spent the night at the Beverly Hills Hotel or the Four Seasons Hotel. And three, she did not have scratches all over her back. He told her that she had scratches all over her back, and he said that it was from sleeping with these men. But she actually did not have scratches on her back. She then begins to wonder if Russel is suffering from some sort of severe mental illness. Maybe schizophrenia, she thinks. And maybe he's hearing voices that are giving him false information. Which is definitely not far-fetched to assume something like that. And that is the opinion of what her father was doing. So I totally see where she would think this. Russel would tell Taylor stories about his ex-wife and his ex-fiancée, who were also each mothers of one of his sons. He said his first wife was arrested for DUI while speeding in the car with their son. He said she would throw dishes and cut curtains when in a rage. He said his ex-fiancée stole his financial documents and hid them in the wall of their guest house. Taylor would actually run into the ex-fiancé one day. Okay? This also becomes important. She thought she was going to scream at her because of the horror stories that Russel had told her. But she didn't. She was actually very nice to her. And she looks at her, Taylor smiles, and she says, "You seem like a nice girl. You should run for the hills. Also, you could rest assured that if you're driving, especially if you're driving in his car, he is filming you." Looking back, I'm sure she wishes she listened to the little voices in her head that she kept shutting down when they told her to get out. Not long after this, Russell shows Taylor that he had run a background check on her and printed out pages upon pages of information about her, including former addresses and names of former neighbors. She also found out that he had a service called US Search to look up her license plate number. He would explain this all away by saying that he just wanted to know everything about her because he had been burned so many times in the past. That does not make this okay. That does not make this okay. I'm sorry. It does not make this okay. We've all been burned. This is a little excessive. About a week after Taylor and Russell move in together, Taylor was in the office and she begins having technical issues with her printer. So we could all relate to this. And when I have technical issues, this is my go-to, okay? She bends down, she unplugs it, and she plugs the printer back in. If that doesn't work, then I've got nothing. That is exactly what I do. And if it doesn't work, I don't know. I got nothing. While she's under the desk going to unplug the printer, she spots two hooks that are nailed into the desk. And they're holding a recording device that was on and recording. She picked it up and she saw that there were 5 audio files on it. When she pressed play, they were all recordings of her, just like the ex-fiancé told her there would be. When she went to confront Russell, he actually did not deny it, and he responds to the accusations by saying that it's just because he doesn't know her well and he's been burned in the past, and he just felt this would be the easiest way to get to know her. No, this is a terrible way to get to know somebody. Don't do this. Years after the recording incident, Taylor was in her room getting dressed, and she spots the computer mouse moving from across the room. So picture you're on one side of the room getting dressed. You look across the room at your computer screen, and your mouse is moving. She later realized that it was Russell using a program to access the home computer from his office. He was reading all her emails on the home computer when he was working. After about 3 months of dating, Russell begins to tell Taylor that she needs to have a baby because she needed to be a mother. He would push and push the issue until Taylor finally did become pregnant. After she becomes pregnant, he drops a new bomb on her, and he tells her that he already has 2 boys, and he does not want to keep the baby if the baby is a boy. Luckily for all involved, the baby was a girl. And I say that because Taylor herself states that she was so sucked in by him that at this point, she would have listened to what he wanted to do with the baby if the baby was a boy. Shortly after Taylor finds out that she's pregnant, the couple move into their new home. When she's about 4 months pregnant, Russell's mother and his children come over, because Russell and Taylor have to go to a charity event together. Okay, fine. Taylor makes the boys pizza, and she walks upstairs to begin getting dressed. Shortly after this, Russell comes home from work. He goes to find Taylor. He grabs her by the throat. He shoves her against the wall, and he tells her, ready? People, ready? If you ever serve my children pizza without a vegetable on it again, I will kill you. How dare you humiliate me in front of my mother like that? This is nothing. This is nothing. This is sick. She's so scared that she just begins apologizing to him. He lets go of her throat and he tells her that she's such a wounded lamb and that she crumbles at every little thing. No, she's not. You can absolutely tell by the way Taylor speaks in her book that she was completely brainwashed, in my opinion, saying that when things were good, they were great. Those were some of the happiest times in her life. But these happy times do not cancel out all the things that he has done to her up to this point. Less than a year of being together. That same summer, Russell takes Taylor and his then 5-year-old son, Griffin, out to dinner one night. After they order, Griffin walks around to the table where his father is sitting, and they exchange something, like they do a handoff under the table. Taylor has no idea what's happening. Griffin returns to Taylor's side of the table with an engagement ring. Taylor looks up at Russell, and Russell asks her to marry him. Of course she says yes. This is the love of her life in her eyes. And although this is such a sweet gesture, it really, really is. Especially because his son is involved. Again, it does not cancel out everything that this poor girl has been through so far, and it's only going to get worse. Russell and a 5-month pregnant Taylor got married in October of 2005 at the Palmilla in Los Cabos, Mexico. It was just the two of them, and the ceremony was at dusk. After they exchanged their vows, Russell pulls out a box, and it's a cross necklace. One side is engraved with an A for his son, Aiden. The other side is engraved with a G for his son, Griffin. And the middle is a T for Taylor. He puts the necklace around her neck, and he whispers in her ear that he needed her to be the glue that holds his family together. Again, this is such a beautiful and sweet moment. It truly is. That's really actually so sweet. It's so thoughtful. But it does not cancel out the things that he has done thus far. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. I know I keep repeating that, but I thankfully have never been in a seriously abusive relationship. But just from what I know, it is typical behavior for to go from high sweet gestures to low lows of abuse. Their daughter, Kennedy Armstrong, was born on February 25th, 2006, 1 year and 11 days after their first date. So like I've said before, everything that we've covered so far, he has done within the first year of their relationship. After their baby was born, Taylor worked even harder trying to make her marriage work because she refused to allow her daughter to live without a dad and go through the same abandonment issues that she had, even if it was at the expense of her safety and her happiness. Okay. I want to make sure that I say this right. I understand where she's coming from in this statement because the first time that you meet your baby, your entire life changes. And as a mom, you refuse to have your baby be sad about anything. It literally is like a knife going through your heart when your baby is sad. With that being said, the relationship that they were in was not healthy for her either. I'm sure that this is a very catch-22, and I know that it's so much easier said than done, so please don't misunderstand anything that I say. For the first few months after the baby was born, things were calm and peaceful in their household. But that doesn't last long. He soon went back to the same person that he was, questioning her with things such as, "You went to lunch at this restaurant on this day. Who were you with?" If she is unable to give him an answer that was accurate and believable in his eyes, he flies into a rage. A few months after the baby was born, the family travels to Mexico together. The couple decide to go out to dinner on a date night together. Taylor wears a green halter dress. They get into the car. He looks at her and he says, "You look like a whore." She would spend the next year making sure that she was always careful not to offend him and be available to him whenever he rang for her. After the brief period of calm following Kennedy's birth was over, the DV crept back into the relationship and it had intensified. Okay, guys, If you're still here, I love you. I love you all. Before we move on, things are going to heat up and they are going to become more difficult to hear. So please keep that in mind before deciding to move forward. Russell began using a new tactic of ABUSC, where he would grab her hair and slam her head against the side of the car between the two doors or against the side of the passenger window. One night he BEAT her head so bad on the way home that he actually felt bad for once. And he told her next time that he hit her, that she should hit him back. About a month later, on the way home from a party, Russell began banging her head against the passenger side window. She reached over and she pushed his face with the palm of her hand. It did stop at that point, but it wasn't over. The following morning, he looked her straight in the eye and he told her, quote, "Remember when I told you the next time that you should be back? Don't ever do that again because I almost killed you last night." End quote. Another night, Taylor was with Russell at a friend's party. She had previously met the founder of MySpace and he says hello to her. He introduces Russell to him and says that this is her husband. After he walks away, Russell is so furious he's accusing her of sleeping with him because he seemed unaware that Taylor was married when she introduced them to each other. Taylor apologized repeatedly as usual. On the way home, he grabbed her head and he began banging against the window. He did this so hard that she actually had a knot in her head from it. After they got home, he began screaming at her and blaming her for making him so angry that he could not control himself. That night, Taylor had her nanny, Gloria, take pictures of her wounds for documentation. So, I think in her mind, she was going to use them as a power card for the next time that he started in on her. But of course, this would backfire. If she shows the pictures to the cops and he goes to jail, she will ruin his business, and in retaliation, he will drag her through court. He will make her bankrupt, and he will make sure that she never sees her daughter again. Russell would often also want to be intimate with her after these attacks. A few days after this huge blowout, Russell began trying to sleep with her, telling her how much he loved her. Because she didn't want to make him angry, she pretended to be in the moment and she let him have sex with her. Still wanting to save her marriage, Taylor began seeing a therapist in 2009. She asked Russell to come along with her, to which he replied that he has already done anger management classes and they don't do any good for him, so this is a waste of his time and it's not going to help either of them. That spring, Taylor got a call from the producers of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. They told her that they were looking for cast members and that her name had been mentioned to them a few times. Taylor agrees to go down and meet with them. And spoiler alert, she makes the cut. We all know this, right? May 22nd, 2009, Russell and Taylor go over to the W Hotel to watch the Lakers game on TV. Her best friend Jen had just gotten engaged, and she invited them over to say hello to her fiancé and to show them the wedding plans thus far. Taylor and Russell were in separate cars that evening, and they all went back to Jen's house, following each other. They got out of the car and they all sat on the back patio. Russell decides at some point he wants to go home, and Taylor wanted to stay a little longer because, first of all, she had her own car, and second of all, he had left her at parties and dinners countless times. After Russell leaves, Jen's fiancé turns to her and he asks her how things are. Because Jen is her best friend, obviously Jen knows everything that's been going on. And so does her fiancé, of course. So Taylor says that all she could respond with was, some good days, some bad days. As she's leaving her house, she turns to her best friend and she says, "If anything ever happens to me, just promise that you guys will take care of Kennedy." That's a scary statement to make, right? That's really scary. Mark and Jen told her that if she wanted them to get her apartment for her and Kennedy, that they would be more than willing to do that for her. Then suddenly they hear a noise, okay? And they think this noise is a coyote. It's not a coyote. It's actually Russell. He walks up to Mark repeating, "You're not going to take my wife away from me." Russell then punches him in the back of the head, grabs him, and throws him into the pool. As Mark is trying to get out of the pool, Russell is punching him repeatedly in the head, and he's holding his head under the water. Russell finally lets Mark go, and he lets Mark get out of the pool. Not so it could be over, so that he could continue this outside of the pool. When the girls try to break up the fight, Russell throws Jennifer in the pool, Taylor in the pool, and one of her dogs in the pool. Jennifer begins screaming because apparently pit bulls can't swim. I didn't know that. Did you guys know that? I had no idea. That's so scary. I didn't know that, though. She was able to get herself out of the pool and her dog out of the pool. She grabs a fire log and she begins swinging it at him. She swung and hit him in the back of the head, but it did not even faze him. And he just kept punching Mark until he decided that he had had enough. He gets in his car and he drives off. Mark is covered in blood and the girls call 911. While at the hospital, Jennifer was telling police how fearful she is for her best friend and her best friend's life. And Taylor is on the phone trying to figure out how she was going to fix this, how she's going to keep her husband out of jail, and how she's going to keep her family together. While her best friend's fiance needs 20 stitches, has 5 inches of hair pulled out of his head, and he loses 5 of his front teeth. When police question Taylor, she gives them an account of what happened without implicating Russell as the one who is responsible for this. Again, this is why I say, in my head, I feel like she's so brainwashed. Understandably, Jen is furious at her friend. Not because of the situation she was in, but because she's unwilling to get out of the situation, and it's now affecting innocent people around her. She spent the night at Jen's house, and the following morning, the two come into Taylor's bedroom to let her know that they're on their way to the cosmetic dentist to try to get her fiance's mouth fixed. And although I don't want to take away the fact that she probably felt awful about the situation, her main concern was still Russell and not breaking up her family. After they leave, Russell's best friend calls her to let her know that he had twisted the entire story to make it look like Mark had started the fight. And even worse, he goes down to the police department to strengthen his claims and file a report. When she finally does get Russell on the phone, he blames the entire incident on her, on Taylor, telling her that it's her fault for talking about their relationship with other people, and she should just leave and let Mark get her and Kennedy an apartment. There's no remorse. There's no acknowledgement of fault. Nothing. As far as he is concerned, his wife started this mess, and he is just a victim in this situation. Because Jennifer had told police that he had tried to kill them, the Beverly Hills police had to investigate it. When they finally get Taylor on the phone, she downplays the entire situation. Shockingly, I know. She assures them that her life is not in jeopardy. And after this call, Jennifer calls her to let her know that Mark decided not to press charges. After this, their friendship is obviously never the same again. Jennifer could not forgive his actions, and Taylor could no longer downplay his actions because Jennifer and her fiance had witnessed it firsthand. So as far as she was concerned, the friendship was over anyway. Over the next few months, she would be in touch with the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And even though she continued to pray that Russel would change, she knew that if she landed this TV show, that she would have at least some sort of income for her and Kennedy if she had to survive, if she had to leave and she needed something to survive on. Instead of Russel being grateful that Taylor got him out of trouble, maybe even using this as a wake-up call, he just went back to temper as usual, and he would erupt on her on an average of every 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, remember the dinner with Jen and the athlete. Here we go again. He tells Taylor that he wants her to take a polygraph test to prove that she's not cheating on him and that she hadn't cheated on him in the past. At first she says hell to the no. Not in those words, in my words. At first she says hell to the no. But after some convincing, she agrees to take the test. On November 20th, 2009, Taylor Armstrong walks into the room for her polygraph test. She is asked 4 questions. Have you ever had sex with the NBA player? No. Have you ever had any kind of sex with the athlete? No. Was the scab on your back something sexual? No. During the course of your marriage, have you ever had sex with anyone other than Russel Armstrong? No. The results of the test show that she is not being deceptive. Russell never apologizes for his actions or his accusations, and a few months later, he even accuses her of faking the polygraph. He knows how to fake a polygraph, or that she paid the person who was running the exam. In March of 2010, the Real Housewives cameras start rolling for season 1 with castmates Adrienne Maloof, who was actually her only real friend before the show started, Camille Grammer, Lisa Vanderpump, Kyle Richards, and Kyle's sister Kim Richards. One night, Russell screams at Taylor and leaves her at a charity event. This time is different than others because she's already casted on the show at this point, and if she wants to keep her job, she has to be very intimate and very open with these women 7 months a year. So she could no longer hide the ABUSE as easily as she was able to in the past. Taylor pays a lot of homage to the show and her castmates, saying that it was the show that essentially made her take a step back and look at her relationship in a different light. She also says that she was so happy when she got the show because she believed that the cameras would save her, because she thought that if cameras were following her all the time, that he would stop doing what he was doing. And people have credited these reality shows for saving their lives. I don't believe that it would be far-fetched to say that Taylor Armstrong falls into this category, and this show possibly saved her life. That's truly my opinion. October 14th, 2010, the first episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills airs. Russell would read all the comments about them and let any negative comments completely consume his life. I actually get nowhere near probably as many comments as they get, and it's not easy to read. But you gotta kind of... He even sets up Google alerts to be notified when anything is put out about either one of them. At the end of January, Russell and Taylor fly to Dallas for a few events that they had to attend together. One night, they're out for dinner and drinks with friends, with a few of Russell's old friends, because remember, Russell's from Dallas. They're also staying with Russell's friends while in Dallas. Russell gets up to go to the bathroom, and when he returns, Taylor's taking a picture with a few girls who are fans of hers. He's not happy about how one of them were hanging on her, and he begins to change. The fans thank her, and they go back to their seats. Before Taylor could even sit back down, Russell grabs her arm, pushes her out the service door, and then pushes her inside the home of his friend's house that they were staying at. Their friend's daughter, who's in their 20s, is in her bedroom at the time. They go into the guest bedroom. Russell shuts the door, and Taylor walks into the bathroom. Russell comes flying into the bathroom, spins her around, and begins hitting her in the jaw. After several blows to her face, something snaps, and she's in severe pain. She could no longer shut her mouth, and that was because Russell had knocked her jaw out of the socket. But that did not stop him from hitting her. It wasn't until she fell to the floor, she's unable to close her mouth, and she has saliva running down her face that he finally stops. She leans over the toilet bowl to try and figure out how she can pop her jaw back into place. Even though she knew she needed to go see a doctor, she did not call an ambulance because she did not want Russell to go to jail. So she just lay down on her back, stared up at the ceiling, and tried to ignore the pain. She never did go see a doctor for those injuries. After they returned home, Russell was still mad at Taylor for talking to his friend's wife about what had happened. And he told her that he was moving out. At this point, I believe she was just so broken that she didn't even care. And she actually told him she thought it would be a good idea for him to move out. The following day, Taylor meets up with Camille Grammer and fills her in on everything that has been going on. She says Camille is super supportive to her that day and the days that follow. Russell never did move out, but Taylor demanded that they need to seek some kind of help, and they agreed to begin therapy together. The therapist immediately picks up on Taylor's body language and the immense fear and anxiety that she's feeling. He asks Taylor to begin having private sessions with him, knowing that there's quite a bit that she was not saying during their couple sessions. At the advice of their therapist, Russell begins taking medication, and on March 16, 2011, Taylor's super excited about him agreeing to take the doctor's advice and to really give this treatment a chance, and it seemed to be working magically for a little while. Shortly after this, it was time for Taylor to meet back up with her castmates and begin shooting again. It would be during filming that Camille Grammer would utter the words at a tea party that are heard around the world. He hits you. Once it's said, it could not be unsaid. And now the whole world was going to know. Moving forward, Taylor always tried to keep a smile on and assure everyone that things were going well and that they were working on their relationship. That spring, Russell and his friends go out for drinks one night. Taylor and Kennedy fall asleep in the master bedroom together. Fine, whatever. This should not be a big deal. Okay? When Russell comes home, he begins screaming, "F you, get the F out of my life." Kennedy wakes up and Taylor pulls her close. That's when he looks at his daughter and he yells, "Your mom's a whore. Your mom's a bitch." Understandably terrified, this poor baby begins to cry hysterically. Taylor begged him not to do this in front of their daughter, but it seems to fall on deaf ears because he doesn't stop. And he yells again, "It's your mom's fault. You need to know that your mom's a bitch. Your mom's a whore." Taylor took Kennedy into the room and held her close for the remainder of the night. The night before Taylor's 40th birthday, Russell and Taylor attend a fashion show at Adrian Malouf's house for the show. The producers reserve seats up front for the housewives, while the husbands have to basically fend for themselves. Because, again, the housewives are the stars of the show. Duh. Right? So keep in mind also that Taylor is currently working while she's at this fashion show. Russell felt as though she was not giving him enough attention, and as soon as they leave the event, he went at her as per usual, yelling at her for not sitting with him. The housewives take a trip to Vegas. This is actually the episode where Lisa Vanderpump and Taylor go to Planet Hollywood for Lisa's daughter's bachelorette party. Okay, so Lisa Vanderpump and Taylor Armstrong go to Las Vegas to Planet Hollywood for Lisa's daughter's bachelorette party. Okay, they're all filming because actually the other housewives are at Adrian Malouf's casino at the Palms. So this was for work. She ends up forgetting her cell phone on the casino floor and she misses a bunch of calls from Russell. He calls the room at 4 a.m. screaming at her about how she is sleeping with a Chippendales dancer. Because it was a bachelorette party and they went to Chippendales for the evening. After she gets home from Vegas, Russell questions her, okay? They're laying in bed naked and he starts accusing her of having bruises on her back from sleeping with the Chippendales dancer. Taylor tells him that she has no idea what he's talking about. This is when he raises up his elbow and he puts her in the right eye. The next morning, she's in so much pain that she could not even move her eye, and Russell tells her that she's just over-exaggerating. The next day, Taylor goes to the eye doctor, but not without Russell. And on their way there, Russell tells her what she needs to say. And he walks into the exam room with her. When the doctor comes in and examines her, he finds that the flap that had been raised up to fix her lens during her LASIK surgery was wrinkled and that she would have to get it repaired. When the doctor asked her how this happened, she told him that her daughter Kennedy accidentally kicked her in the face. Every appointment after that, Russell showed up to in order to make sure that she was never alone with the doctor. After the flap repair surgery was over, she still couldn't look down, and she went to a reconstructive surgeon who told her that 40% of her orbital floor, the bone that supports the eye, had been fractured. Along with this, the muscle was trapped in the fracture. That's why she's having so much pain when she looks down. And the only way to repair this is to have orbital reconstructive surgery. He went on to tell her that she would need a titanium plate placed behind her eye. Best case scenario would be that everything goes back to normal. Worst case scenario would be that her eye is sunken in for the remainder of her life. After she returns home from the doctor's appointment, she packs a bag for her and for Kennedy, and they head off to Laguna Beach for the weekend with her mom. Once there and settled in, she calls Russell to tell him it's over, and all he says is, okay. I will be out by tomorrow. I'm guessing he knew that he had gone way too far this time, and he had to get out. She decides to stay in Laguna for 2 extra days just to be sure that he's really gone. And when they arrive home, Taylor checks the house, and he is indeed gone. His closet is cleared out, his toiletries are cleared out, and it looks as though he has never even lived there. About 2 weeks after he moved out, Russell came over with his son to visit Kennedy. While he's there, Taylor shows him the MRI. He was able to see the fracture and the muscle herniating through the fracture. He apologizes immensely and tells her that he loves her so much, that he loved her more than he loved his own children. That's a really scary statement, in my opinion, because you're not supposed to do that to the ones that you love. And if you love her more than you love your children, what would you do to your children? August 15th, 2011. Russell and Taylor were scheduled to meet at 2 o'clock that day. When she goes there, the door is shut and the lights are off. This struck her as odd because he never missed a day of work. And when he failed to show up for their meeting, she knew something was really wrong. She began texting him and calling him repeatedly, but never got an answer. She calls their mutual friends and their therapist, and nobody has heard from him that day. She has to pick up her daughter, so she picks up her daughter from camp, and she takes her to dinner with her assistant. After dinner's over, Taylor, the assistant, and Kennedy drive over to Russell's home to meet his friend there. Her assistant waits in the car with Kennedy, and Taylor and the friend walk up to the door. They're ringing the bell and ringing the bell. Russell is actually living with his friend at this time. So when he comes on the intercom, she insists that he open the door immediately for her. When he opens the door, she tells him that she needs to see Russell's face right now. That's when Russell's friend tells Taylor that his door has been locked since Friday night. This is Monday night. The three walk past the room and his friend screams, "Oh my God, he has himself." Taylor is in the middle of the street screaming and crying. His friend calls 911. The daughter goes home with the assistant, and Taylor gets a ride home from her mom. After this, Taylor did not leave her house for an entire week and only emerged when it was time for her to plan Russell's service and cremation. Taylor holds a celebration of life in Beverly Hills, and she sends part of the ashes to Texas for his family to do what they want with their own services. When Taylor gets Russell's things back, she makes alarming discoveries. His wallet contained 10 debit cards from 10 different banks, and all of the accounts are empty. There is no $14 million trust fund, and in fact, there was no money at all. He was $200,000 in debt for the month of August alone. He was actually in such dire straits when he died that he actually had to pawn his Rolex for $9,000. He had a little over $7,000 in cash on his nightstand and a $25,000 bill for his son's school. No note was ever found. In 2004, Taylor met and married John Brewer, the lawyer who was helping her out with Russell's financial issues. So at least there's a happy ending. And I think everybody deserves to be happy. I truly do. And I believe she deserves this happiness so much. Okay, guys, if you are still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. I appreciate you so much. Please let me know what you thought down in the comments. I really want to know. If you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. If you have any case suggestions, please email me, harding527@yahoo.com. As long as the information's on my side, I'm really good about covering your cases for you guys. And until next time, stay safe out there. I love you.